Friends, today I want to work with you on making sure we have organized our story in the best way possible. The first step in organizing a story is making sure our story is told in order of what happened first and then what came after that, and then after that, and then next, and finally using those transition words to make sure we're telling our story in order. A second way that we make sure our story is organized is by making sure that our sentences do not run all together as one big sentence. And so we use punctuation to stop one thought and begin a new thought about something new, and we put periods or exclamation points or question marks or even sometimes commas in between thoughts so that we are able to read and concentrate on one thought at a time. That's something that you learned a long time ago. But in third grade, we look at a new way to organize a story because our writing is getting so much longer. We are adding so much more information and detail as a third grade writer. And so just adding punctuation is not always enough to organize a story. So today, let's look at a story that has been written by a third grader, and let's see what he has written. Rocky chased the ball through the yard. He caught it in his mouth and loped back to me with a doggy smile. I scratched his ears and said, "Good boy." Dad was climbing the ladder next to the kitchen window. He was holding a blue paintbrush that was dripping white paint. He always works on our house on the weekends. Think about what you notice in this piece of writing. The third grade student noticed that his piece really had two parts. One part was about his dog Rocky, chasing the ball, playing fetch. The second part was about Dad, climbing the ladder, holding the paintbrush, working on the house on weekends. This is a really good thing to notice, because when you notice that you actually have two different topics, it's kind of like having two small stories combined together. So we need to ask ourselves, do they really fit together into one small moment? And if they do they really fit together as one big piece? So in this instance, yes, we decided that yes, these do fit together as one story, because what's going to end up happening is that he's going to throw the ball for his dog Rocky again, but this time Rocky is going to get so excited he's going to run into the ladder that Dad is standing on and bump the ladder, and Dad is going to start wobbling and falling. So at some point, these two pieces, even though right now they are about two different things, these two pieces are going to end up connecting, which means, yes, they are part of one big story, but right now they are just two separate parts. So how would I organize that, and how would I fix that? Well, today I want to show you that when you are looking back over your writing and as you get ready to publish a final draft, I want to teach you that there are a few places in your writing where writers begin new paragraphs. And a paragraph is a chunk of writing of 3 or more sentences, all about one thing. And then I move to a new paragraph when I'm ready to talk about a new thing, but those two things still connect together as one big story. So I want to show you today where writers usually start new paragraphs. Some of those typical places are when you begin a new subtopic, when time has moved forward, or when a new person is speaking. So let's look at this story a little bit more, and let's ask ourselves, would I need to begin a new paragraph? Since I've already noticed that I actually have two separate parts, the part about Rocky and then the part about Dad, I do have two parts, even though they're all part of the same story. So I'm feeling like that means I am beginning a new topic. Now, these two topics are going to connect to one big part of my story, but right now I have two topics. And so what I would actually want to do is I would want to go ahead and label using an editing code. I would want to go ahead and label that this is where I would start a new paragraph, because this part is talking about one thing, one part of my story, and this part is talking about another part of my story. And then later in my story, those two parts will connect when Rocky bumps into the ladder that Dad is standing on, and how I react and what I do to help Dad and keep him from falling. But right now, I have two different parts, and I want to focus on those two different parts without it getting confusing to my reader or without it feeling overwhelming. And so I've used my editing mark to show that when I write my final draft, I'm actually going to begin a new paragraph. Now, what is that going to look like? Well, when I begin my new paragraph, and when I am writing, that means that this sentence, the beginning of my new paragraph, is actually going to move down to a whole new line. So let me kind of erase my mess here so that you're able to see. What this is going to look like. All right, so now I have my two parts, Rocky chasing the ball and playing fetch with me, Dad climbing the ladder next to the kitchen window holding the paintbrush. So now I have my first part and my second part. But do you now notice how they are split into two parts? I didn't keep on writing the rest of my paragraph there because I needed to begin a new paragraph when I started talking about a new topic. Now, what are some other reasons I would do this? Well, I begin a new paragraph when I add a new topic. That's what we did in the paragraph up here. We noticed that we started talking about a new part of the story. So we moved our sentences down, even if we had leftover space, and we started writing the next part of the story. Another reason I could begin a sentence or a new paragraph is when time in my story moves forward. And this is where a lot of my third graders are going to need to be checking their writing, because a lot of you are using great transition words like later that next day, the next morning, finally, 5 minutes later. Ooh, I can't type today. Right, 5 minutes later. You're skipping a little bit of time. And so that means that time is moving forward. You skip a little bit of detail that's not really important, and you move down to the next part of your story. That would be a place where you would begin a new paragraph. When a new person is speaking, this is when we are using dialogue in our writing, and I've already seen several of my third graders using dialogue in your writing. But when you have characters that are taking turns speaking, so for example, if in our paragraph up here, if I was speaking and then Dad started speaking, I would begin a new paragraph to show that a new character is speaking. So those are a couple of examples that we're going to be spending the most of our time looking at in third grade. These are the 3 examples that I will be spending the most time talking to you about in our writing conferences that I can use to help me when I need to begin a new paragraph. So what are we going to do today? Well, you are going to practice this idea on another paragraph that was written by a third grader. Here's a picture of my writer's notebook. I've already done this step. And in class on our writing table, I have a stack of these paragraphs already printed and cut out for you. So if you are at this step in writing workshop and you are at this step in your personal narrative, this is the next thing you're going to go back and look at in your own writing. But we're going to practice it first, and we're going to create an anchor chart in our writer's notebooks. So you are going to put the title at the top of your page in your writer's notebook, please make sure you have the date in your writer's notebook. Go grab a piece of paper with the paragraph written on it from the writing table and glue this into the next blank page on your writer's notebook. Then you are going to grab your highlighter that is also on the rainbow table, and you are going to read through this piece, and you are going to look for the two parts. Let me get a new color here. The two different parts of this paragraph. So for example, if I read, Ginger stretched out on the carpet and yawned. I scratched behind her ears and she leaned her head into my hand. She purred. My mom was in the kitchen baking cookies. She was singing a beautiful song she always sings when she's in the kitchen. If I'm reading this, I notice there are two different characters being talked about. There is Ginger and there is Mom. And I notice that there are really two different parts of this story. There is the part about Ginger stretching out on the carpet and yawning. I scratch her ears and she leans her head into my hand and she purrs. And then if I keep highlighting, am I still talking about the same thing? No, all of a sudden my story switches to a new part. Now I'm talking about Mom. So now I would highlight my second part. Mom was in the kitchen baking cookies. She was singing a beautiful song she always sings when she's in the kitchen. So where would I put the new paragraph? If I was going to rewrite this, where would I separate these two parts? My new paragraph would begin right here, where I start talking about a new part, which means I would not keep writing here. I would stop. No matter how much space I have left over, I would stop. I would go down to a new line and I would start my new paragraph and my new sentence right there. And I would want to have a little bit of space in between. Now you do not need to go rewrite this, but I do want you to make sure you highlight it and label the new paragraph spot in your writer's notebook so that you're able to look back at this anytime you are needing to make new paragraphs in your writing. So what should I do now? Well, your next step, my third grade friends, after you have created this anchor chart in your writer's notebook, is to go look at your own writing. That means go to your personal narrative sloppy copy. I'm going to put PN for personal narrative. Reread your personal narrative. And look for at least one place you need to add a new paragraph. That doesn't mean change your writing. That doesn't mean add new writing. It just means look for a place where you would need to put this little mark to show that instead of keeping on writing in the same line, I would move my sentences down and start a new line and start a